Greetings, family. My name is Duke. I am a health educator and coordinator for Black Men's Exchange National, joined with my good friend and co-worker here, Kashama Sankofa, and we are joining you
Peace, Black
again
family.
for
How
our
y'all doing?
second. Yeah. We're joining you again for our second BMX National live stream for this pandemic times in the quarantine. Anyone who joined us last time, we talked about how white oppression and the white plague deals with the capacity of Black folks and how it inhibits us from living peaceful and fulfilling lives. Some of the comments from that section include from Tone Dene, who said that they call it white insecurity because anything that is supreme doesn't need to assert itself. Shades of that. We were also joined with our good friend Lowell B. Denny, who mentioned that they had to step away early, but they are waiting. They are waiting for the next session, so hopefully they'll join us here in the comment section today. And last but not least, we also had a younger brother, it looks like, who, based on the information that we shared, showed that they also knew a little bit of the information in Medical Apartheid, which is a great book that talks about some of the medical infractions that have been conducted on Black people throughout the centuries. But here we are again. We have some current events, some juicy ones at that. If our producer could roll clip.
Well.
I don't even know where you want to begin. I don't know. It's some
Well,
good
we're
ones
definitely
here.
gonna begin with President Donald John Trump, as well as his wife Melania testing positive
And
for the Rona,
his
as
advisor,
some of our
right?
Black people call it.
Mhm. Well, prayers
Yeah.
prayers to them and their family. They've been diagnosed with COVID-19. I won't disclose exactly what I'm praying for, but prayers to them and the family.
Well, okay, but on a serious note, I think that this is something that we should think about because I mean you brought it to the forefront as far as the what was that videotapes or something or tapes leaked out where he was saying that he would downplay the
Hmm.
virus and and of course he did downplay the
Yes.
virus and he continues to do it, but not only does he do it, his base does it. And I'm not just speaking from opinion. This is a fact. There were conservative or right wing protesters who went to the capital of Michigan, protesting a lot of the COVID orders, including mandatory masks. Donald Trump has also, made his opinion on masks very known, in which he does not, I guess, generally take them seriously. And we've seen at his rallies, people don't wear masks. We've seen him and his staff not wearing masks on several occasions, and people from his office have been tested positive from COVID before. I'm really not surprised, honestly. I thought it was going to happen sooner when I heard about other people within his staff were testing positive, people who he were close to.
Hmm. Yeah, we've heard a couple of months ago, some of the inner circle of the White House was already testing positive, and so a few of us were just waiting in the wings to see when
You
or
were
if.
standing down and standing by.
You know that. Look, I can only say so much on this particular program.
Yeah, we can't get too
However,
we can't go in too hard on this particular live stream.
on this particular program, but there
Oh
was
man.
some root work going
How
on
about
around there.
how about my brother Glover? What's his name
Brother
again?
Glover.
Yeah.
Uh, Danny Glover, right? I keep getting them confused with Donald and Danny. I don't remember.
Donald.
It's a
You
D
have
and a
Donald
Glover.
Glover, and then you have Mr. Danny Glover.
Hmm. So I actually had a couple of thoughts about this one. One, uh, how he was actually in conversation with the actress and writer Michaela Coel, who's done Chewing Gum and most recently I May Destroy You, another series. That one is actually based around sexual assault. Um,
I
and
haven't
in the
seen that yet, by the
conversation, he
way.
was.
No, I
I
said I
think
haven't
it's an
seen that yet, by the
amazing
way.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an amazing show. It has issues like everything in media has issues, but I love Michaela Coel personally, far as how she goes about her writing process and the themes that she explores. And I was enthralled with the show. But beyond that, what I found interesting is that Mr. Glover, along with Michaela, are two individuals who talk about their experiences with racism really heavily, right? They are able to really articulate it, talk about their history around it, and maneuver through the racism, if you will. And Mr. Glover, in this instance, talked about how he was felt uncomfortable around Black community because of his sexuality and whether and he didn't really and even in this conversation he was not clear about where he really stands in the conversation around sexuality. He just said that at one point he was confused and he didn't feel like he had the space to explore his sexuality because he felt unsafe. And inside of this same conversation with Miss Coel, he mentioned that regardless, he loves and values his white friends uh, who uplift him and celebrate him. And Michaela Coel co-signed that particular comment. And they mentioned
Mm.
how it shows that there's no such thing as like good or evil. It's just a matter of individuals having good and bad qualities, but we can all work together at the end of the day. And I find it really interesting because that the stance that he took is not unique. And I find it really interesting that individuals who happen to be traumatized in the Black community for one reason or another, most often in this case sexuality, will abandon Black community and actually communing with them, going to cookouts, whatever else, blah, 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 and then find this safety and serenity in white communities, deal with overt racism, and then come back to the Black community like, look, fight for me because look what I deal with. But you abandoned Black community years ago,
Yeah.
around this. So I find it really interesting that it's a continued cycle of uplifting this humanity of white individuals when they show up negative traits and qualities, but completely erasing and removing themselves from Black communities.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. And I've kind of summed it up as, there's like an inverted type of logic that goes on. And it's not to promote one way of thinking over the other, but you take, the collective history of whiteness and you excuse all of that to make room
Hmm.
for the white individual. But then you take, actions of black individuals and then you ascribe that to the black collective. And
Yeah.
and so I think that's very interesting that is that, the dynamic that is the aesthetic of it. And
Mhm.
I think it's like that for a reason. There are very few coincidences in the world, as a wise man once told.
One more comment on it before if I'm ready to move on. But one thing that I will say that I appreciated that he brought to light that we're not ready to fully discuss as a community yet is that Black people just be moving real fluidly around the conversation of sexuality. Like we don't really have an exact language on how we want to deal with it. And it's when we come into white spaces that we start adopting gay and queer and all these other different politics when in reality, if you look at pre-colonial times, Black people were just doing what they wanted to do, and it wasn't all this conversation and politics around it. It wasn't until this introduction of various outside religious practices, mind you, and abusive ones at that, that we started to adopt these principles and behaviors. And so, what I appreciated about what Donald Glover said, I got the confirmation from our producer, thank you. What I appreciate what Donald Glover said is that he just was exploring himself and he wasn't sure. And it was just like, I feel good around these people, and this feels good, and that feels great. And that's a conversation I'm used to hearing from elder Black folks before there was the new queerology, if you will, around how we engage sexually. But I'm
Well,
interested
Duke,
to see
we
any
don't.
comments about what people think about that in the comment section.
Yeah, and I was gonna say we don't have to necessarily move off of it because something else recently happened that we didn't have in the current events that I think is relevant. The new show Ghost, Power Book 2, Ghost. I don't know if you have heard of this or not, but there was a same gender, I'm thinking some type of sex scene. I don't know if it went
Hmm.
fully into sex, but I think it involved kissing and some taking off of clothing, but there was a mixed reaction from plenty of people, including Snoop Dogg, who said that, why am I seeing this, on my television? So, but I bring
Hmm.
that up to say that you mentioned how we as a community have moved pretty fluidly around this conversation, not fluidly for our listening audience around this conversation, but we constantly are confronted with this conversation,
Hmm.
and we're gonna have to find the time and the language to break it down as a community for our well-being, because there are so many other, when we talk about the media, there are so many other
Hmm.
agendas and other messages that are at play that have nothing to do with actual Black wellness and Black, community dialogue and understanding between Black people.
Well, you actually did a presentation on the colonization of sexuality and gender, and I just vote for, at some point, that being a BMX live stream, if you will, going forward at some point, and we can just put that in the books to as a scheduling, because it is time. But I do not watch Power, but I did hear about the uproar that this particular scene caused, and apparently, people are correlating it with other things that are happening in media too, like Lovecraft Country. There's
Yeah, yeah.
homosexuality in that between Black individuals, and there's a meme going on right now, and I find it very interesting, this meme, because unfortunately there's some truth to it, but there's
Yeah.
people aren't contextualizing it, so it looks like quote unquote homophobia and whatever else. But there's a Black show, and then inside, so they did the meme like a Trojan horse. So the Trojan horse was the Black show, but inside the Trojan horse, it was a bunch of quote unquote gay stuff. And it was inside the Black community. And there's no contextualization around what exactly is happening in media spaces. And we, as a community, because we aren't having a dialogue, we're correlating homosexual representation sometimes with homosexual agendas. So it's a really dynamic topic that our community has to start being honest with, if you will, because so many people want to be on one extreme or the other. When the truth is, there's a middle ground here about what's going on and how we are talking about sexuality as a country and as in our own communities.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to
So
address. I see a comment from Isaiah. Forgive me if I say this wrong. Polnitz. It says, "Hey, can I come on sometimes?" And I want to say, absolutely. Every single live stream, at some point during our producer will drop the link. We invite every one to come on at some point. If you click the link soon enough, you'll be able to join us and talk to it. We'll also be inviting individuals in today as we get into our topic today, which is about Queen Sugar, the bitter relationship between diabetes and Black people. So if you have something to contribute to that topic, please join us when we drop that link. But the next current event I saw, just real quickly, I think it's Ireland, is
yeah.
has said that Subway does not meet the requirements for bread, for their bread to be called bread.
Right. And so that actually, I'm glad we're doing that current event last because it's very relevant to our topic, Queen Sugar, right? The whole reason that Subway, okay, so this is the thing in Ireland. Bread is considered a staple and they are exempt from certain taxes. So Subway stands to save a lot of money by not having to pay taxes on the bread that they sell in Ireland. However, the sugar content in Subway's bread, even though they promote themselves as this healthy alternative, the sugar content is more than 5 times the amount than the regulations in Ireland will allow. And so it technically has to be listed as a confectionate, sweet, or fancy bread.
Hmm. It looks like you muted yourself,
Oh, my
David.
bad. Yeah, so it has to be, considered what they call a fancy sweet bread or dessert or confection, which we
Hmm.
know is not a dessert. Like we eat Subway for lunch, but and it does the bread doesn't even taste sweet. But that just goes to show you how hidden sugars are in a lot of the stuff that we eat. We don't realize it, and it's almost like putting a little sprinkle of crack in there. It keeps you coming
Hmm.
back for more, and you don't even know why.
I also want to say that we don't learn our lessons either, and even for myself, because it had to be about 4 maybe 5 years ago. Was all over the news because it was labeled that their bread had iron shavings or something. It had some material, some ingredient that was very similar to iron shavings. Essentially, and so they had to
Dang.
change that particular load. Absolutely, that was all over. If I'm lying, someone can Google this real quick. You can look it up.
May the
But
Lord
this
strike you
specifically
down.
to change the American, like, yeah, you can look this. This is happened, and because I was devastated because I probably single handedly made the $5 foot long promotion stay as long as it did.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah. I be on some Subway too.
yeah, I was devastated when I heard about it. So, but yes, particular brands of their bread. It wasn't all of their breads. Was had this really dangerous ingredient inside of it, and they had to change. They say they got rid of that particular ingredient. Who knows what they did at this point? Same thing with Coca Cola, many years ago. Uh, got rid of this ingredient, and here we are again. They are back in the news for their bread not being bread, quote unquote, legally in a different country.
Darius Wilson said, "I just want the $5 foot long to be $5 and a foot long again." So what? They
And
shaved it or something?
a foot
They
long
cut it
again.
off? Was it is a 10 inch
Yeah, I
now?
mean, so one, they they started adding tax to it, which is really unfortunate. And like that $5 foot long become it be like 5.55 these days. But I remember when it used to absolutely just be like 4.85. I remember that was the time. But beyond that, the bread has absolutely not actually measured up to a whole foot these days. It probably be about 10, 10, 10 inches as opposed to 12. But that's where we are. But anyways, we covered those topics. I hope you all are enjoying, everyone. We're going to be moving into our topic, Queen Sugar, the relationship between diabetes and Black people. And not only do we have a special guest who is someone who's actually been with us before in the name of Dr. Lisa Davis, but we've also decided to share. Hmm?
She's not a doctor, but we can call her doctor.
Uh,
She's she's
yeah,
such an expert. She
yeah, she be ministering to the spirit.
yeah, she ministers to the people.
Sister Lisa Davis will be joining us to discuss this topic. But in addition to that, anyone who happens to know me, I am someone who is in the arts. And as that, I have a friend by the name of Lady Breon who has done a poem on this topic. And I just thought it would be so fitting to share this poem with you all and to also open the lines of communication. Whereas, if any of you out there have a talent, whether it be poems or a short story, singing and you can sing good, um, feel free to send that talent or a video of that into the BMX inbox. So that way, our team can look through it for any topics that we may have shared in the past, as well as topics that we may do in the future that you think may relate to these particular themes. With that in mind, Adam, could you roll Lady Breon's clip?
My mama got a sugarcane smile. Southern sweetened iced tea, hint of lemon in her kiss. My mama loved me like home cooked meals. Slow roasted conversations. Leftovers in the corners of my mind like I remember. She gave me cheese curls like teething rings to place between my gums and satisfy my crying. She twisted my thick hair with globs of blue magic, make me Sunday fresh. My skin hot fudge, she caramel at best. My mama got skin like Raisin Bran, where moles decorate the flakes of her melanin. My mama, cornbread and cola, candy yam and cabbage, banana pudding and cobbler. Food so good on the taste buds, it make her feet swell. She wobbles sometimes like the pendulums on grandma's clock that do tell time. Learning from all the times great-grands was cooking for church's second service. Learn to praise God through baked mac and cheese and pray. My daddy come home from the service, but he dead and gone now. And my mama in combat mode, her body covered with infections like chocolate-coated candies. Sugar level 501, which is to say, she got stroke caught in between her teeth. A1C14, veins constricting, then collapsing like salivating glands when you taste that cheesecake that's too rich and saccharine, so sweet, it's sickness. They had to cut cysts from out her breast like she had cavities within her chest, and I'm scared that if she don't water down the syrup in her spirit, they will amputate her limbs and ligaments, leaving her bitter to the taste. All sour in the face, where salty tears replace the stars that twinkle and burst in my mama.
Looks like it cut short a little bit, but if you would like to see that poem, we'll link the rest of see the rest of that poem. We'll link it into the comment section. Just letting you know, me and Kashama are both wearing our Value Black People t-shirts today, and just letting you know that we have these shirts in red, black, and green, and you
That's
can
right.
find them on www.amassi.com for, I believe, including for, because it's online, we got the shipping and stuff, $16.95, and we have them small, medium, large, extra large, XXL, and we have a few triple XLs. And if you have any special requests or sizes, just please send them in. And we are shipping them out. If you are interested in getting yourself a Value Black People t-shirt, proceeds go into not only supporting the live stream and some of our endeavors, but also, it says Sonya Ross ordered theirs a couple of weeks ago. I will make
All
sure
right.
that
Congratulations, sis.
distributor, congratulations. Tell us what color you got, and we'll make sure our distributor gets on that. So, Queen Sugar.
The
I
bitter
chose this
relationship.
particular topic. I chose this particular topic because I think it's just an ongoing thing that in our community we know that diabetes is something that a lot of Black people struggle with, but it's kind of hush hush. I think, at least in my family, it was one of those things that was just like so and
Really?
so suffers from this particular disease. In my family, it was just like I had two people, both of them my grandfathers actually, lose themselves to this particular disease, and there was no conversation as I would think should happen with the children or the younger ones about exactly what's going on, how it can be prevented, in the steps that was going on. But I watched my mother go through the changes in order to take care of her father, my grandfather, and the things that she had to do. I remember going with her to go get Ensure milk over and over again. I remember seeing my grandfather's eyes just like this really glossy yellow. I remember
Hmm.
him having to walk around and they talking about possibly amputating. He didn't go through that process, but there was that particular moment. It was a lot of different things that I saw when I was younger around the topic of diabetes, but there just wasn't any dialogue about what exactly is going on. It was just like so and so is really, really sick, and we're trying to take care of them, but that's it. Um, and so that happened to be my relationship with diabetes, and I watched my grandfather's um, pass to this disease. How did you come in contact with diabetes in your family? What did you hear?
Well, we all well one being very young, I heard of sugar. You know, somebody had sugars. Their sugars went up or something like
You got
that,
that sugar.
right?
See, when
Yeah.
I heard
And,
sugar, it was a different context when I heard it. He got a little
had
sugar in his name.
sugars. Yeah. And so I think the first person that I really could well identified as a diabetic when when that concept became real to me was probably my father's mother, my grandmother. The interesting thing is she lived
Mhm.
to be 92, but she was diabetic, for most of my life. And I remember seeing her, having a finger pricked to test her blood sugar. And I remember learning,
Mhm.
that she had a chart in her room that showed the signs of hyperglycemia as well as hypoglycemia, both high and low blood sugar. So that was from my childhood. And then
Mhm.
gradually, my father was diagnosed. My grandmother was diagnosed. Had a cousin I found out was diagnosed. He lost his leg when I was in high school, and this cousin wasn't an elder. My grandmother also lost her leg when I was probably like in the fifth grade or something like that. So diabetes was treated like
Mhm.
just something we kind of dealt with as black people, almost kind of like the cops. You got relatives who get locked up, you got relatives
Mhm.
who get, caught up in the sugars, right? And what you said about prevention is absolutely true. And I don't think it's not so much of they were being hush hush about it, but just so much lack of knowledge when it comes to preventing diabetes. There was I think in my family I saw a lot of proactiveness when it came to treating it, people changing their dietary habits, but not a lot went into preventing it. And even
Mhm.
now I'm kind of seen as the eccentric one, you know, because I won't eat certain things. I'll pass up the cornbread with the cabbage. You know what I'm saying? Or I'll say, no, don't put no rice on my plate. And people are like, you don't need rice? What? That's looked at as kind of crazy, but hey, it is what it is. If I got diabetes running in my family like this, then I'm gonna ease up off the cornbread. I'm just simply not gonna eat cornbread every time I eat cabbage or greens.
Mhm.
That's a simple step to take, but that is not talked about, and in a lot of ways, it's not believed. Like a lot of people don't believe that it can be prevented. And I think later in our conversation, we'll talk about the narrative um, in regards to Black people, how we're just constantly told we're at risk, and it's never broken down to us that no, we're not genetically predisposed to this. It's not inherently Black, but there are things that are happening in our environment externally that are leading to the disparities that we see when it comes to diabetes.
Before you get into that, I just want to make another mention on the topic of prevention. I'm thinking about I remember being younger and seeing people passing away and dealing with the conditions of diabetes because I also grew up in the church. And even when my family wasn't suffering, I saw so many of church elders and peers having to take their blood sugars consistently. And they still had the
Right
candies,
before
still
church dinner,
passing
huh?
out the candies in little strawberry wrappers. And I'm also thinking about how often, because my grandmother used to also make her own snow cones and sell them off to the people in the block as a little side income. And I remember Kool-Aid rather, and that just being absolutely atrocious in the amount of,
Hmm.
of sugar that would be in that. But I was also taught to make Kool-Aid that way, and that became the standard. And I think about how we knew that our people were passing away from this, but we did not activate prevention tactics. We did not activate self love and uplifting tactics on this particular metric of health, and it worries me at times in considering that. But with
Well,
that,
well, I mean, I want us to bring on Lisa because I was going to ask you,
mhm.
like, in what area of health do we actually, on a collective, massive, impactful level, exercise that level of self love and self preservation?
And that's absolutely fair. And I'm not prepared to answer that at this moment because I'm probably going to say nothing. I will say we do nothing. But because I mean, when you look at us, like we are leading in so many different diseases. We are the leading death rates and numbers in so many different diseases. But I want to stay on topic for
And we have Sister
diabetes, but I
Lisa
think
with
it is
us.
something that for us to think about. Welcome, Lisa Davis. Welcome back. Good to
Yes,
see
and
you.
thank you so much for having me back, Uhuru. I'm so glad to be here. And I just have to say this off the start. When you introduced me as doctor, I was backstage having a conniption. I was like, oh my gosh, oh no, I, they'll be like, oh, she's promoting herself as a doctor. No, I appreciate the correction, but I'm not a doctor. But what I am an expert in is eating food and living and trying to navigate through this health system and making changes and making adjustments and reading books and understanding. I was fortunate enough to learn at an early age that we are what we eat. And you all were saying so many things. I was like, oh my gosh, I was taking down notes and writing things down. I think it's very interesting that in Ireland, what you mentioned about Subways and how they're saying this is not real bread or this is not the bread that we're used to. This tastes too sweet, but yet over here, that tastes natural to us.
Mhm.
And I was just reading some statistics that talked about how the rate of diabetes is higher among Chinese Americans than it is among people in China. It's higher among other like Asian Americans or other people when they come over into this country as opposed to people who continue to live in their native country, that the rates of diabetes go up on the American diet. So that's one thing that we should understand. And we know that they put sugar in everything. At some point, we probably need to really look at the effect of what they call agriculture, what it is, the effect that it has had on our people, the effect that it's having on the environment, the effect that it's having on everything, because they put sugar in everything, sugar and salt, because they want to have us continue to eat it. And what you were talking about when you were saying the substances that are not edible, that don't sound anywhere near edible, that were found in some of the bread that Subway makes. I think that's something that's found in bread in general. And I'm like you, brother. I mean, I love bread. I'm like, oh my gosh, how much
Like
knowledge
Oprah.
how much do I really want to know?
I love a
But
sandwich.
exactly. But I would like to start this discussion this way because I think there are some key things that we have to understand, key things that underlie everything that goes on with African people. And I use the word African people because I just cannot call us Americans in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Can't do it. But anyway, that are, I think we need to really understand and look at some things that are just a part of every aspect of our existence since European colonialism came into existence and was on the rise, and since they basically invaded the world and literally tried to take it over through capitalism, through genocide, murder of people, and through the exploitation and the looting of resources. We live in a colonialist society, a country. We live under colonialism. This country has been at war with African people since its inception, since they stole the land over here from the indigenous people. They've been at war with African people, but also people that are non-white for the most part. And we have to understand that this system that they call medicine was born of the same system that the police system came out of, that the educational system came out of. Because if we look at any metric in this society, Black people are going to have the worst for the most part. We usually have the worst of all metrics, the worst of all measures. So it should not shock us at all when we look at this healthcare system and when we see that we have the worst of all the metrics with healthcare, whether we talk about heart disease, whether we're talking about diabetes, whether we are talking about asthma. Black people are always going to rate as being among the worst in terms of the statistics. And Brother Kashama, you brought out a very interesting thing. We sometimes tend to think, and we are certainly treated as if this is just an inherent part of being Black, as if this is who we are, as if disease are just naturally a part of our identity because there's something about being Black, or there's something about stuff that we are doing that causes us to have these outcomes. I think we need to have a shift in how we approach this system of medicine. We also need to think in terms of systems. We are going to have the outcomes that we have. The primary reason that we have the outcomes that we have is because of the system of medicine that we have been forced to embrace at the expense of obliterating, of lobotomizing what we knew, what our African ancestors knew, the knowledge that they have in terms of their relationship to nutrition and to how to live on this earth. So we have been forced to embrace a system which does not have our best interest at heart, no matter what it does not. So
To that point,
so many of the things that we're seeing, it's socially engineered to be that way. But you were going to say something, Brother Duke? So
yeah, I was saying we actually have some statistics prepared. If Adam could show them up on screen
yes,
in order
please
to
do.
highlight your point. You mentioned a lot of these things, but people need a visual. So it says African American adults are 60% more likely than non-Hispanic white adults to have been diagnosed with diabetes by a physician. In 2016, non-Hispanic Blacks were 2.3 times more likely to be hospitalized for lower limb amputations as compared to non-Hispanic whites. And lastly, in 2017, which was just 3 years ago, African Americans were twice as likely as non-Hispanic whites to die from diabetes. And
Okay,
so
so
this just goes on to really highlight that point.
what's
yes.
interesting about that, Duke, is that those numbers weren't always like that. In fact, in the earlier part of the century, well, not this century, the last century, 1900, up until I would say the 1940s, from what I was reading, getting ready for the show, of course, diabetes was actually kind of low in Black people. And it was actually seen as being more of a disease among Jewish people, or European Jewish people, for whatever reason. And even the studies that I read were saying that it wasn't scientifically backed. However, what was known is that it was low among Black people. And so we look at some of the things, we have to ask ourselves, what are some of the things that have changed for us as a people, that have taken us from being, one of the least likely to have diabetes to being twice as likely, or whatever the number indicated.
I also recall, because I did a little bit of the looking of diabetes too. It used to, Lisa, are you by chance? I'm sorry, are you just technical things? I'm having to be watching the live stream on a separate device.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So, something that I find interesting is that diabetes used to be a leading cause of death in high transmission rates in Italy and Europe before in Africa. It was a leading cause up there before Black people became like the face, if you will, of the diabetes epidemic over here in America.
But what I just want
And
to
it goes to
add
show about their dietary practices.
yeah, but what I just wanted to add to the statistics that you just mentioned is, and this doesn't get talked about nowhere near the way that it should be talked about, and that is that when we are being treated, you have one thing called the disease, but then the treatment and the disparities in the treatment that we receive. We will not be recommended, if they know that there are drugs that are very, very effective or that it's better with dealing with diabetes and other drugs, we will tend not to be referred to those kind of drugs. We are not referred to like rehab centers and rehabilitation centers and aftercare the way that other people are referred to them, the way that people who are white are referred to them. There are so many disparities in terms of the level of treatment that we receive. So it's one thing, that we might have the disease and we might be showing up at the hospital at higher rates with diabetes. Maybe, I'm not exactly sure about that. But the treatment that we receive, the disparities in treatment is very, very real. And I was just looking at some statistics with things that I was reading about because I have been experiencing a lot of issues, because I do advocacy work with people who have been, in rehab centers or people who have been hospitalized, and the way under which we are discharged is absolutely atrocious. We are discharged without proper follow-up. We are discharged without proper care. We are not given the time that other people are, or that I should say white people are given to be able to heal. The way that we are communicated with, the way that doctors will talk to us, it's not the same. And that can have impact on people. If a doctor just treats you as, oh, you're just some number, and they treat you in a very, very clinical way, and they're not concerned about who you are as a human being, they're not concerned about certain things that you are doing, they're not concerned about the things that might be affecting you, they're not going to ask you questions about, oh my gosh, well, when you go home, do you have anybody who maybe can help to monitor your diabetes or various medications? What are some of the things that are going on in your life? If they do not have that kind of rapport with you, then the outcome of the care is going to be affected. And those are things that are very, very real. And they will talk a lot of times about implicit bias, but in the medical profession, it's not implicit. When they might think one way, but when they deliberately do not do certain things that can make things better for us, those are actions, those are explicit measures of racism. And so these are factors that we also have to look at. So when we hear that, Black people, we might be diagnosed with diabetes at higher rates than, other groups. But what is going on in terms of that treatment? Why are we getting those kind of outcomes once we have been introduced to various treatments or once we have been introduced into this system? And then another thing that happens, which I think is very important to understand, and one of the things that I think that we must do, because it's not just enough to say that, oh, this is a racist system, which it truly is, but how do we navigate through this? What are the things that we can do? We do not have to continue to be so vulnerable to a system which does not protect us anyway. It just does not. And
Absolutely right.
yeah.
I wanted to have a couple of comments
Sure.
here. So one, and Kashama also has information on this topic. I was hoping he would get to this topic, but Mo brought up that the conversation about sugar is linked to imperialism, a stage of capitalism. French Santo Domingo, the wealthiest colony, was sugar. Cuba was sugar. Hawaii was sugar. This is
Yeah.
business, and that's why it's in your Subway bread and in your cereal. Lowell also mentioned that we are having technical difficulties on Facebook, so reminders to everyone, you can still catch this stream on YouTube for Melanated Solutions Media. It is our official YouTube. To that end, before Kashama goes into this point, I also want to let people know that we are preparing to get ready to let individuals individuals in. Our producers get ready to drop the link for us. To that point, please be concise with what you have to say. We do have to keep the show moving on. We're on a time constraint, and our producers will will handle us if we go over. Will handle us if we go over. But we affirm you, and we do it with love. But please come on and join us. We would love to hear some of your talking points around diabetes, particularly as we move in to how do you prepare to make sure that you and your family do not suffer from this particular disease as rapidly as our community has for the past few generations. But Kashama, you have information about how sugar is very closely linked to the colonization and slave trade. And if you could just go over some of that history for us, I'm
Well,
sure the audience would love to know.
well, honestly, well, I mean, Lowell did such a great job at breaking that down. Like when you look at the flyer, you see the sugarcane plant next to the cotton plant. So, and we wanted to, show you that image so that you know that sugar, before there was King Cotton, there was Queen Sugar. Just like Lowell said, um, Haiti or Santo Domingo, whatever they call the island before it was the independent nation of Haiti, and before it became the Dominican Republic, it was built on sugarcane and sugar. Same thing with Cuba, Puerto Rico, even in the deep South, Louisiana, sugarcane was, a crop that basically, not funded, but basically pushed the slave trade forward. And it's so ironic that, like you said, sugar is still used today to cause so much harm, on Black people. We've had, like I say, a very bitter relationship with not just diabetes, but with sugar itself. It's brought us here, basically. We got here basically on the backs of sugarcane. That was a primary motivation in bringing a lot of enslaved Africans to this side of the globe, this hemisphere, North and South America, as well as the Caribbean. So, I mean, when we think about that, but then also it goes deeper as far as a lot of things that have impacted our numbers, as far as diabetes, come from what Sister Lisa is calling colonialism, and what Lowell referred to as imperialism, and what we would refer to in the economic sense as capitalism. We talk about milk, and the diet on Black people. A lot of people don't know that milk has also been linked to, higher numbers of diabetes, the lactose and the casein within that as well. But the only reason milk is on the food group, or is considered, part of a balanced meal, or some kind of way that we have to get calcium, is because we know that it is beneficial for dairy farmers. There's a lot of business that goes into it. Now, before we go back to Lisa, though, I do want to make sure that everybody knows that we call her an expert, and that's because that's what she is. I just want to give some people a little bit more of a background. She's the chair of the healthcare working group with the Black is Back Coalition. And she also does more work in the community with other organizations. That's just one that I know her from, that we've worked together, and she's been doing this work around health and justice for a long time. But when we talk about diabetes, injustice and oppression plays a huge role in it. So that's just why we made sure that we did put that element of reminding us of the enslavement, and that, sugar is still playing a role in, the harming of Black people.
Definitely. And that was such a good analysis that you brought into it, because we really have to understand that everything about this relationship has been based on our oppression and exploitation, and the way that they exploit the resources, the way that they use them against us. That's very important. And, that's an excellent analysis that you brought out into this. I also want to say that they're also finding that air pollution also impacts diabetes. And with the way that with the way that our bodies, process certain things. So air pollution. So there are definitely environmental factors, but not just that. The medications themselves, I am a big proponent. As African people, we must create a shift in our relationship to this allopathic medical profession, this Western way of how they do medicine. We must create a shift. Many of us think, oh my gosh, if I get sick, I'm going to go to the doctors and they are going to save me. That is not going to happen. We must change that relationship. And one of the things that we must begin to do is we must monitor our own medications. I have here one of my favorite books, the PDR, Physician's Desk Reference. Actually, this is the pocket guide to the Physician Desk Reference. We must monitor every medication that they give us. Do you know that there's also diabetes that's induced by the medications they are given to us? A lot of us will take, Lipitor. One of the side effects of Lipitor is type 2 diabetes. The FDA literally had to begin to issue warnings that says that statin drugs, and a lot of statin drugs have to do with drugs for cholesterol and whatever else. Yes, can cause diabetes and also brain damage. I mean, I was
So
like,
wait.
memory loss.
Sister Lisa, I got a couple questions for you. First,
Yes.
do you have somewhere you can direct us to read more about the air pollution and the connection to diabetes? I'm sure you do. I know you do.
I do.
literally
I
just
probably
Googled it. It pops up right away.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Let me
He
I
said
said
he
I
just
literally
Googled it and
typed
it
in
came
air
up.
pollution.
Yes, if you
It
come
came
type
up
up,
right away. Air pollution diabetes is a major thing in multiple
yes.
studies now. It's linked to type 2 specifically.
Yes, and if you look up the FDA, look up Lipitor and diabetes and the FDA. I'm sorry, I can't show this to
So
you.
with that being said, my second question was going to be, with that being said about the statin drugs, is it wise for a doctor to prescribe any of the statin drugs to somebody who's already diabetic?
I would say no, but again, I'm not a doctor. I can't make that diagnosis.
Right.
But here's what I would do.
Okay.
I would say that as the patient, you should be talking with your doctor. You should be bringing your books. I'm going to give people a little bit of advice in terms of how you deal with a doctor. It will completely change the relationship. When I used to, when I would be visiting, when I would be assisting people with going to the doctors, like my mother at that time, and if I would ask them about the side effects of medication, they would usually reply to me very arrogantly and say, "Oh, all medications cause side effects." That's when I didn't have my books or anything with me. But when I came in with my books and my research, because I would print things out. I would come in with my research. Like, here's another book called The Pill Book. And I would say, doctor, I want to show you something a moment. You see that medication right here that you are prescribing? Well, it says right here that it causes this side effect and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And this person is exhibiting these side effects. Or you could say, aren't there other medications that I could be given if you still want to take these medications that do not cause these side effects? And I guarantee you, they will then look at you so differently. They will approach you with such respect, and then they will change it. And that's a very important thing that we have to do. We have to stop accepting that once we're under a doctor's care and we start to get other symptoms or other side effects, or we start to exhibit other diseases, we've got to stop accepting that as normal, because that is not normal. We should not accept that. If we are taking any kind of medication, we must monitor them. If you have to be rushed to the hospital for any particular reason, you still must monitor the medication, and you should have a team. It's good to have people that you care about, that's going to visit you, and your family members who are going to love you. That's very good to have, but you also want people who are going to be very, very comfortable with talking to the doctors, with questioning, with looking at things. You should get as many opinions as is needed. In fact, I say you go to a doctor until you find the doctor that's going to tell you what you want to hear. Now, that doesn't mean that you discard, that doesn't mean that you want a doctor to lie to you. You don't want a doctor to lie to you. But a doctor is somebody that you will be potentially building up a relationship with. You want a doctor that can communicate to you. You want a doctor that can make you feel comfortable, that can come up with a program with something that you can work with, that you're going to feel comfortable with, a doctor that you can talk to. I mean, if I needed to, I'd go to 20 doctors if I had to. I'm going to go to the one that's going to tell me something that I am going to want to hear, that's going to tell me something that I can work with. We have to, when we begin to look for other opinions, many times we will get a second opinion from somebody who works in the same hospital or trained in the same kind of way as one doctor. I mean, and you could still get a second opinion from them. That's important too. I'm not going to say it's not. But you should be looking at doctors who believe in naturopathic medicines. You should look at doctors who are trained in other systems of healing. And one of the things that I want to say, I think it's also very important that we have to take a systems analysis approach. One of the things that you always saying, Duke, earlier about, some Black people can just look at people and judge them individually. In the meantime, they throw out the whole history of what's happened to us and the whole systems. It's very important to begin to take a systems analysis approach. And that's very important in terms of medicine as well, in terms of the hospital and the doctors that we visit, because one system, which is this Eurocentric mainstream medical profession that is based on pharmaceutical industries, which, by the way, the pharmaceutical industry does nothing but study the natural plants and the natural resources in other countries. Then they loot those natural resources. They're getting laws now that where they're able to take out patents on plant life, and then they make the synthetic version of those plants, and then they sell them back to us as drugs.
Right. Right.
But that's what they do.
Sister Lisa, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What made you dive so deeply into health, and what was your motivation for getting this type of power, for empowering yourself, I would say, in the health industry?
Okay, I just want to finish this one thought, and I'll be quick with it. So that is one system of what they call medicine that deals with the pharmaceutical medicines, and under that system, there are certain things that won't work because those are the rules under that system. So under that system, there is no cure, there is no this, there is no that. However, there are other systems of health, other systems of care. Africa had a far different system of health than this Eurocentric way of doing things. And under that system incorporates nutrition. That system incorporates the various elements of the earth, like energy and all of these things. That system is observes how we relate to this earth. I mean, life came long before the pharmaceutical industry ever showed up. There was life on this earth. And the first life forms on this earth were not humans. And I can assure you that the first humans were not doctors. And yet the earth sustained this life. That's a very powerful relationship. So that's a whole other system of healing. So what system are we going to choose? So we have to begin to, I think, take an approach like that in terms of medicines, and then we will get different answers. But we must understand that we also need to politicize and talk about traditional African medicines. We need to demand that becomes a part of any kind of mainstream medicine, whether we believe in using those various herbs or not. But if we begin to politicize that, then that begins to open up a whole other aspect, a whole other perspective, a whole other way of studying, a whole other way of looking at things, in a whole other approach. Because if you're going to be dealing with allopathic medicines, I can assure you right now, you should also want nutrition to be central to any kind of disease or that you're dealing with. It should be central to that. And just to briefly answer your question, Brother Kashama, I just sort of, I'm going to say, kind of fell into it, for lack of a better word. I didn't have any kind of real passion about nutrition or anything like that. I guess I maybe had a passing interest a little bit. It was always interesting to me that you could have a person that could get a disease and one person would succumb to the disease and the other person would not. Or you could even have somebody that could live in the same house, in the same environment, and one person would never get the disease. And I'd always felt, I don't know how this cat got in this room, but I'd always felt it was interesting that I was always more interested in the person who didn't die from the disease, because I would be like, well, why don't you look at what they're doing? Why didn't they die from it? But again, that was more like a passing interest. And then at some point, my face began to break out. I went through all this painful adolescence. And then when I get in my 20s, my face starts to break out. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I can't have this. And one time it broke out so badly that it looked like somebody took 2 black magic markers and painted it on the side of my face. And no makeup would cover it. And I was like, I can't go through this. So I was, someplace in Newark, and somebody said, why don't you try getting some chamomile tea, go to a health food store? So I did. I walked into this health food store, and that was a moment that changed my life, because this woman began to ask me all these questions, and they were so personal. She goes, do you suffer with this, that, and all of that? And I'm saying to myself, how she know my business? She happened to be white too, but I'm like, who she thinks she is? How does she know my business? And the thing about it, every question that she asked me, the answer was yes. And then she said, I'm asking for a reason. I think you might be suffering from what's called the yeast syndrome. And I was like, what? And I picked up this book in the health food store. And my attitude has always been, I will never experiment with medication. If they talk about taking medication, I will never do that. But because the changes had to do with what I ate, and they didn't pose any risk to me, I was so desperate. They could have told me to go on top of the Empire State Building and stand on top of my head, and I would have done that. And so I looked at this book, which basically was only eat tree bark and air. Anything that gave you pleasure, don't eat it. But for at least 3 days, I made all of those adjustments. I don't know how to that. Excuse me, please. I don't know how she got in this room. But anyway, I made all of those adjustments, and I never felt better. And because it was so restrictive, it was hard for me to follow that diet, that kind of lifestyle strictly, but I never felt better. And it created a roadmap. It created a journey. It was like a journey began in which I understood that, my gosh, you are what you eat. You don't have to be so vulnerable. So, since I made certain changes, I haven't had to buy sinus medication in 30 years. I used to walk around talking about my sinuses or my allergies. I don't even talk like that any longer, because I was able to make that connection, but not just with that connection. I was able to understand that we are what we eat, and we are what we eat, and that it created a roadmap. It was like a rewiring. And so anything that I would begin to, that anybody would suffer or whatever, I would go into the health food store. And I would find that when I would go into the health food store and I would look at these books, they were some of the most encouraging books you'd ever want to see. You just look at the titles. It would say The Cure is in the Cupboard, or How to Cure Cancer, or Suffer No More, Get Rid of Heart Disease. Now, even if you don't necessarily believe that's possible, but to hear that, to continue to hear those kinds of things, as opposed to hearing, oh, there's nothing you can do, there's no cure. And I will say this much, I do agree, there is no cure for anything. Cure indicates you take this something one time, but the body can heal from anything. You don't take anything just one time. You don't do anything just one time in life and that works. No, it doesn't. So if you're looking for that one shot, that one thing, that one needle that's going to cure something, that is not going to happen. But we should look for healing. Healing indicates a journey, a lifestyle. Healing is a continuum. I can assure you right now, if I go back to eating the way I have been eating, I'm going to have allergies. I'll have allergies by the end of the week. That's going to happen. I can assure you, if I go back to eating the way I have been eating, I'll begin to develop asthmatic reactions. I can assure you that. I can assure you that my bones will start to feel arthritic. I can assure you those things. So health is about a continuum. Health is about a journey. Health is about, it's a wonderful journey. It's a very empowering journey. And we have to decide, we have to really understand that we are what we eat. We have to reconnect with these relationships, again, regardless of what our belief systems are. Life appeared on this earth without any help from humans. Humans were not the first life form, and the first humans were not doctors. And I think the pharmaceutical industry, humans might be like, I don't know, 30,000 or thousands of years old, older than that. The pharmaceutical industry is about 100 years old or so?
Yeah.
But yet this earth sustained life. And that is a very powerful relationship to have with this earth. And nutrition must be a part of everything that we do. You can live without medication. You cannot live without nutrition. And we need to understand something right now, whether it's diabetes or heart disease, but especially diabetes, because with diabetes, it's not like it's one particular organ, it like
Right.
affects, right. It's so
It is.
pervasive.
It is it. What from what I'm seeing when I'm reading about it, it involves not just the pancreas, but it involves a lot of other organs as well,
Right,
including the liver and stuff like that.
right.
So and it's interesting you bring up the treatment and within this system because even on the flyer we have a photo of Halle Berry as well as Gabernie Sidibe, who are two
Hmm.
different sizes, and a lot of people tend to think of people being diabetic, they think of it as an overweight thing, not
Mm.
realizing that a lot of black people are diabetic and we're not necessarily overweight. And the studies are even showing that there's a higher prevalence in black men having diabetes and not necessarily being overweight, and they're showing that what they're calling the visceral fat, that black men tend to not store the glucose or something like that in their visceral fat. So the medications and the treatment that are being created are essentially being created for white men with diabetes and not black men with diabetes, just according to this particular study. But
And
so
No,
I'm so glad we have you here because you touch on all that kind of stuff, Sister Lisa. But we do have some comments on YouTube, and I
mhm.
believe Lowell Denny one is in there. But let's get all of them though. Duke, you have that
so
up?
yeah, I do. So, Lowell mentioned that the shift needs to happen and start at youth to impress upon people this body is your one car. There's no rebuilding. Absolutely, that's the truth. Even the young and immortal need to eat well and exercise their bodies. We also see from him that, for the most part, our going to doctors and having to monitor these medications because we've been eating bad food. You can't put that in your body and in the long term be well. Danae Washington, we're going to get to this, as what are you eating and how frequently? And I think all of us had some comments on this particular one. Now, before we
So
start
me,
with this, because Lisa has mentioned a lot of self-preservation and self-love tactics and things in ways that we can really start to preserve ourselves and be better as Black people inside of this colonization context. But I'm aware of how daunting it is to love yourself in this country and how much work and labor that requires and how you can go into remission consistently. And so I like to give people baby steps. And people think I'm joking when I say this, but it's absolutely the truth. Y'all too can say this. But if you want to make baby steps in your diet, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, uh, stay away from white stuff. It's not a secret. Like, stay away from white. Like, white rice is bad for you. White bread is bad for you. White sugar is bad for you. And white chocolate is bad for you because it's not real chocolate. White people, but all of these things, like, as you look up the ways that you compare it, uh, white ingredients versus brown ingredients when you incorporate more wheat breads or
Hmm.
browns and brown sugars,
Mhm.
these things consistently show better better health benefits to you as opposed to their white counterparts. And so it's just something
they
that
have
I
a
think
lower
that should
glycemic index, Duke.
absolutely. And so
Yeah.
this, and they're not the cream of the crop far as like getting yourself to be at the most healthiest. But I always want to give people baby steps. Like if you can't
Hmm.
wean yourself off of sugar yet, get brown sugar. Right? If you can't wean yourself off of rice yet, do brown rice. Right? If you can't get rid of the bread yet, even from Subway, go for the wheats. Like do this on a more consistent basis. And so it takes baby steps. And then you'll find
Another
yourself loving yourself enough to go the extra mile.
Right. And I also just want to say, because when we talk about these things, we also have to talk about access. And many times, like when people are on these health journeys and things of that nature, like you were alluding to, Duke, they might start with something that is so really out of reach for other people to do. I am very aware that poverty is a real thing, and that many of us do not have the kind of access to the kinds of healthier food that other communities might have. Food deserts are real, and the ability to be able to afford food is real. I mean, I go into the supermarket. It's the most depressing thing. I bought a bag of apples, and it cost me $8 freaking. I don't even have children. I am responsible for myself. Now imagine somebody who has a child. Imagine somebody who's making not even $10 an hour, and we can sit up there, and it is important that we eat healthy food. We must understand the roadmap, but we also must understand too that access, being able to even have the mental space to be able to make these choices is important. Stress will make you reach for sugar. When you're under stress, it really will. And I have seen times, and I have been under so much stress, and I just am not able to make the mental space that is needed to say, okay, let me focus on this, or let me not eat this. Although I did create a roadmap for myself, so I know I can't go too far this way. So that's always with me. But those things are very, very important in terms of the access, the food deserts that people have, and the fact that food is just so effing expensive that to try to make the healthier choice, it can be a very hard thing to do. It really can be, and especially if you are on a budget and you have a family. I'm so glad to see that there's a lot more urban farming going on, and I am so glad to see that a lot more of us are really getting into plant-based diets and making healthier choices. And vegan. When I first started vegan, I'm like, you couldn't. I didn't even know how to spell that. I mean, I would have to go. I'd have to go miles to find a vegan restaurant if I wanted something like that. And in fact, it was like basically rice cakes and tree bark when I first started. So literally, I was
Not
like, oh
tree
gosh,
bark.
why bother living? But there's a whole lot more choices now that we are having. So I am glad to see that more of us are getting into this. But again, being able to afford these things, it's very real. I go into those supermarkets and I just want to cry, literally. Even junk food. You can't even afford poverty. Poverty is becoming increasingly difficult to afford. I at one time used to be able to buy, if you just wanted to just put food in people's mouths, you might be able to buy like a large bag of potato chips for 99 cents. I remember one time I was going to some, and I don't often do this, but I'm like, okay, just 99 cents, something real cheap. I looked at a bag of potato chips. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me.
Well, one thing I know you mentioned is like, how sometimes the stress, and we
Yeah.
call it, the stress of being black can, really can really like keep you not motivated in taking care of yourself, or to try to make sure that you put the extra effort in to, to cook certain things. But and I'm glad you brought up agriculture, Sister Lisa, and
Hmm.
farming, because that was going to be my suggestion as one of the ways to help fight the disparities of diabetes and even other preventable diseases. One, I got into the gardening, I got into health, I would say, more so as a political statement,
Hmm.
because I realized how much of our destiny is controlled by our oppressors via our food. You bring up the food
Hmm.
deserts and how it affects our health. So I got into health via agriculture, via the politicizing of my own mind. I sought out to control a certain percent of my own diet, meaning from the ground to the table. And what I found was that when you're growing your own food, it makes it so much easier to eat healthy, and it's also a form of therapy for the mind, because it's very beneficial, I'll say, for the
Hmm.
mind to get out there and to grow and be surrounded in nature. And then when you're bringing your food in, you're more excited about eating it. You have a deeper connection to your food as well, as opposed to, God, this is something I paid $8 for, and I know and I know that capitalists are jacking me out of my money for what should be, about $3. You have the attitude of, this is mine, this is what I truly produced, as opposed to that.
Real
And
quick, I
let,
want to remind individuals that our live stream is open if you want to join. If you want to join, make sure you click that link. It is in the comment sections. Beyond that, I do want to make sure that we do not leave. I believe it's May Washington hanging. She did ask a very specific question. I would just like for you to offer. Well, what is some things that you make sure that you keep in your cabinet as far as what are you eating and how frequently are you eating in order to start reversing some of these health effects that we've been dealing with in our community?
One of the things that I keep for everything is liquid chlorophyll. Liquid chlorophyll is very cost effective for the most part. It can last a long time. It's green. Chlorophyll is what makes the plants green. One of the things that give the plants its powerful properties. It helps to oxygenate the system. It helps to cleanse it. And I kind of look at it as a great substitute, like if you can't do juicing. But I use liquid chlorophyll no matter what. It was one of the first things I began to use. I found that it helped with my bones. It helped with all kinds of things. So I would definitely say liquid chlorophyll. And I would also say greens. Try to make it a habit to eat greens. Just buy yourself some lettuce. Practice doing this. I remember I used to practice just removing all of the the dressings and everything from my salad. But of course, if that's where you start, then that's where you start from. So if you want to put dressing on your salad, that's where you start from. But you should also just try eating just raw vegetables. Like I said, buy some cabbage, buy spinach. Try doing those things. Also, spices. Spices are really good. Turmeric. Begin to add more spices into your diet. Turmeric, cayenne pepper. I have cayenne pepper, turmeric. What are some of the other things? Ginger. Ginger is very good. And oftentimes, oh yeah, ginger is excellent. And oftentimes when we think about dietary changes, we think about elimination. That's like the first thing we have to do. And we set ourselves up to fail almost. Elimination is like so depressing. If I think of, oh gosh, I got to remove all of this. But if you begin to think about, well, let me add certain things to my diet, because many times we are craving things. Cravings are often we often crave because we're not getting enough of the nutrients that we need. We're just not. And we also know that even with farming and even with vegetables, that the soils are so depleted. They really are. So if you can also begin with a very, very good multivitamin, or like a liquid vitamin, or things such as sea moss, or even just trying to take some other kind of supplements, that's a good way to start. It is a journey. It is a journey. You have to be patient with yourself, but at least begin to adopt the mindset of change, the mindset of a shift, the mindset of you must monitor your own medications. And I also want to say something that health is not an individual journey. It really is not. It works so much better when we understand the collective. And one of the things I want to say, oftentimes we talk about colonialism, which is a bastard and a beast, and we must talk about that. But we can't talk about colonialism without talking about the Black liberation struggle. And I heard Dr. Small say this, that the Black liberation struggle is a social immune system of our community. It is the social immune system. That is the reason any change that has ever happened for the better for our community was not due to the Republicans, wasn't due to the Democrats. It was not because of the supremacist court. That is not what made the change happen. It was because of the Black liberation struggle, and we owe everything to this. And when we began to come together as a collective, even when it comes to health, we will find that we can surmount so many challenges. I have seen this before. This is one of the things that the healthcare working group does with the Black is Back coalition. We want to be there as an advocacy force for our people, and as a force where somebody that we know goes into those hospitals, we can help to advocate for them. But of course, making our advocacy patient focused. The patient is the most central person to anything. I don't care how many doctors you're dealing with. I don't care how professional they are and how many credentials they have behind their names. Your body is going to be the one that's going to tell them if what they are doing is effective. And many times they don't even listen to us. You're
Right.
central to that. How you feel is central, and we should never forget that. We should never forget that.
We have to also learn how to listen to our own bodies too.
Yes.
But because we're gonna show a video before we wrap up, but I don't want to leave that sister hanging. To answer
Yes.
your question, as far as what I'm eating and I guess how frequently, everything Sister Lisa said, like in regards to the turmeric, the ginger, the cayenne pepper, I'm on that. I also make my own liquid chlorophyll, which I will usually use some type of greens, some mustard greens. When I'm growing sweet potato, I'll use the greens of the sweet potato leaves, as well as certain herbs that you can pick and forage for. I'll blend that up with spring water and sift it through cheesecloth, and that liquid is like liquid chlorophyll. And I'll let it separate from the water content, and that thick green at the bottom is like super nutritious. So that's just like a little trick I do for myself. I also love sweet potatoes, which is a very versatile vegetable. Sweet potatoes, it has a good sugar packed with beta carotene, vitamin A, and just loads of other stuff. I do. I love my greens, my kales. I love mustard greens as well. Um, I also love kalaloo, which is a Caribbean green, and most times you'll find it in the can unless you're lucky enough to get to Florida, somewhere down south where they grow it. It grows in Baltimore too, Duke, by the way. And avocado. I'm a big
Mm-hmm.
avocado fan. I'm known to, like, this is the thing. If I'm like, out and about and I gotta stop to one of the chicken spots, the mom and pop, get me old 3-piece of fried chicken and a piece of bread, right? I'll make sure that I can find me an avocado too. Well, I have an avocado already with me. Dude, we used to work in the same office together. You could see me coming in right now. If I got a quick lunch, about 2 pieces of fried chicken, but I'm gonna have that avocado with me to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that I'm getting some nutrients, some living nutrients in me. And my only also suggestion is with the turmeric, make sure that you either add black pepper or some form of oil, like coconut oil, or even an avocado has the perfect amount of natural fat to go with that. But with that being said, Duke, did you want to go into some of the things that you're eating before we get to the video?
So I am the baby of the group. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. And what I mean by that is there are some things that I have not worked out fully in my diet. But what I will say is that I happen to suffer from a different thing that we may talk about at some point. But I was really close to just dealing with chronic high blood pressure because I love salt and I love spice. So I had to change up my diet to include a lot more water and less salt, and of course, and some spice. I still do my spice, but with that in mind, I'm absolutely incorporating a lot more herbal teas. I'm sweetening with honey only. I'm doing the alkaline water as well from the different vicinities and shops. I encourage you all to find your local black-owned, if you can, herbal tea shops. They are amazing. They have remedies for everything in some of these different brews and mixes. And so I encourage that. It's definitely helped me out in my process. But I want to thank you again, Sister Lisa Davis. We're getting ready to wrap up. You have been wonderful. Something that you mentioned actually in these last few minutes that I'm going to take with me, and I hope everyone else takes with them, because I want to reiterate. You said that health works so much better when it's as a collective.
Yes.
Health works so much better as a collective as opposed to the individual, and that's something that I'm definitely going to take heed to. And also when you mentioned that people people often forget that the Black Panther Party set up clinics for our people
Yeah.
and had all these
Mm-hmm.
different healthcare initiatives. Like, we forget the layered advocacy of our ancestors, and how we were attacking this system from all fronts. health is absolutely one of them. With that in mind, our producers hit us up to let us know that the video is actually up and ready for you all. So it's actually the poem from Lady Breon again, but this time we'll finish through to completion, hopefully. But this has been a wonderful session. I hope to see you all our next streams. Please feel free to follow us on BMX National Facebook page, as well as the Melody Solutions Media YouTube channel. We'll be doing not only our BMX live streams, but also our Melody Solutions Media live streams as well. Before I tell our producer to roll clip, was there a closing comment really quick?
May I make an announcement real quick? I just want to say, oh gosh, talk about health, and then we think about these elections, which are a nightmare. But the Black is Back Coalition, we're having a march on the White People's House November 7th. We're going to be in D.C. 6th, 7th, and 8th, but November 7th, that's how I'm voting. That's how I'm responding. Build up the Black liberation struggle, and we won't have to be held captive to all of these systems. That's the answer, and even to health, because health is political.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Join in, everyone. Adam, if you could please close us with Lady Breon.
My mama got a sugarcane smile. Southern sweetened iced tea, hint of lemon in her kiss. My mama loved me like home-cooked meals. Slow roasted conversations. Leftovers in the corners of my mind like I remember. She gave me cheese curls like teething rings to place between my gums and satisfy my crying. She twisted my thick hair with globs of blue magic, make me Sunday fresh. My skin hot fuzz, she caramel at best. My mama got skin like Raisin Bran, where moles decorate the flakes of her melanin. My mama, cornbread and cola, candy yam and cabbage, banana pudding and cobbler. Food so good on the taste buds, it make her feet swell. She wobbles sometimes like the pendulums on grandma's clock that do tell time. Learning from all the times great-grands was cooking for church's second service. Learn to praise God through baked mac and cheese and pray. My daddy come home from the service, but he dead and gone now. And my mama in combat mode, her body covered with infections like chocolate-coated candies. Sugar level 501, which is to say, she got stroke caught in between her teeth. A1C14, veins constricting, then collapsing like salivating glands when you taste that cheesecake that's too rich and sack rim on so sweet. It's sickness. They had to cut cysts from out her breast like she had cavities within her chest, and I'm scared that if she don't water down the syrup in her spirit, they will amputate her limbs and ligaments, leaving her bitter to the taste. All sour in the face, where salty tears replace the stars that twinkle and burst in my mama's iris. My mom is hot cocoa when my soul grows cold from all the pain in this world. All gummy bear dimples and a heart made of pecan swirls. My mama, she got a crack pot type hug. The type that fills the house with aroma. My mama fill me up every time I'm around her. My mama is a recipe passed down through generations. And I just pray my children will have full plates before she is called to grace. Amen. Pray her eyes will not be candy wrappers shut before she ever has a chance to meet them. But my mama, she be stubborn like jawbreakers sometimes. So I sit waiting, making pools of apologies, hoping she will forgive me enough to take care of herself, because this ain't no Candyland's child's play. And though disease is hard for anyone to swallow, this ain't no sugar pill placebo, because we know diabetes, it will not just go away. And still, my mama be like, baby, everything gon' be okay. My mama with a smile made of sugar cane as I just can't help but fear her decay.